My parents liked my twin sister more than me. They even spent my wedding money on her. So I cut them off. I did this after my mom asked me to do something for her, but I said no. I am 23 and my twin sister is called Allison. We don't get along. I don't speak to my parents or Allison. This is despite how I've been treated in the past. We used to get along. But I've been keeping my distance for the last 2 years. They haven't bothered to contact me either. But they did recently. Allison is 12. She is only 2 minutes older than me and is there for the golden child. She's there by default. My parents only wanted one child. That was what they had planned. They didn't have the money to support 2 children. They didn't know it was twins until after the birth. It was too late for that. My mom didn't want to risk it. In high school, I learned about this from I found out when I was at a Thanksgiving party from my uncle who had had too much to drink. That was pretty funny. I gave up trying to win my parents over on that day. They did what they thought was right. It was the most natural thing to do in that situation. They had 2 children but chose to adore only one. That was Allison, not me. Allison and I had an amazing relationship. We were always competing. We wanted to impress our parents. I would try to do everything she did. But the more I achieved, the more I was criticized. But the more I did, the more they seemed to hate me for. I was outperforming their golden child. To be honest, Allison didn't want to compete with me. She just wanted to be accepted. She said she was worried about the rivalry. But actually, her main skill was manipulation. She was very good at making people think she was offended. When I did better than her, she would pretend to be offended. This led to many people. This included our parents, relatives, and even some classmates. I was supporting her. They were trying to make me feel bad to help her feel better. In the end, the competition made me get good grades. And I did well in several after-school activities to show how much better I was than her. At the same time, Allison got my parents' attention. She was kind and understanding. I was always the bad guy. This made her feel inadequate. Looking back, I don't think I'd swap what I've achieved. But I wish I had. I wish I had rubbed my success in her face more at the time. 2 years ago, we turned 21. By then, we had both graduated. Allison from a normal college. Allison had graduated from one of the state's best colleges, and I had graduated from one of the state's best business schools. I was top of my class and received a scholarship, so my parents saved a lot of money on my education. Call me crazy, but I honestly thought my parents would be proud of me, but they weren't. Instead, they focused all their attention on Allison and her problems. Allison was finding it hard to make ends meet. She was looking for work, only to be turned down again. And on the other hand, I was working from home as an intern for a company. I had done well there. My parents didn't congratulate me. Instead, they were more worried about Allison's future. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. I was still living with my parents, and I hadn't saved enough money to move out. So I chose to keep my feelings to myself. But after our 21st birthday, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I expected them to accomplish something important for us. But the day before our birthday, I found out that everyone had left me at home on my own. All they left was a note. They left me a note. It said they were going to the beach with Allison and her friends. They said they would be back soon. They would be back in a few days. I remember feeling really upset. When I read that note, they had taken Allison and her friends on a trip to the beach. But I just got a happy card. Birthday card and a $50 gift card. I felt cheated in many ways during my childhood. But this was the last straw. It was so sad and thoughtless. That's why I decided to leave that day, and I never came back. I had a few friends who were ready to let me stay with them. They said I could stay with them until I could find and afford my own place. It wouldn't take long, because the firm where I was working was in a period of rapid growth. The firm where I was working was likely to recruit me full-time once the internship was over. I just needed a place to live. I just needed to find somewhere to live for 2 months at most. I packed my things and moved in with a friend. I didn't tell my parents or sister. I haven't regretted it since. They didn't miss me enough to want me to come back. They did phone me on my birthday though, the day after I moved out, but they didn't call to wish me a happy birthday. They said they'd be returning, but they never did. They said they would be back soon and recommended that I get a plumber to fix the tap. Hire a plumber to fix the tap. I told them I wasn't living at home anymore. I told them I had moved out. I hoped that this information would help. I hoped they would then reply. But they didn't reply. My parents didn't seem to mind and Allison didn't care either. That was the end of it. That was the last time I spoke to my family. I haven't seen or heard from them since. My friends sometimes told me about Allison. This meant I always knew what was going on in her life. But that was about it. They didn't know anything about my parents. And I knew nothing about my parents. I've worked hard for the past 2 years and I finally got my own place. It's not a mansion though, but it's a lovely apartment. It's in a nice area. The rent is reasonable for the money I earn, which is great. Most people my age haven't been able to do that. Most people my age haven't been able to do this as quickly. I'm happy with how my life has turned out. I've also done my best to keep my family. I don't think about them much. Allison recently married a businessman who is almost 10 years older than her. He is older than her. She is now living in California. I thought everything was fine in my family. But then 2 days ago, when I got a call from my uncle, he told me I needed to come. He said my parents needed me to come and visit them right away. They had been in a car accident. They had been in a car accident and wanted to see me. I went to the hospital straight away. I'm not heartless, of course. When I arrived, I discovered that they had already been in the hospital for a few days. They were recovering from their injuries. A truck had hit their car. They were alive but very hurt. They didn't have health insurance. Because my father had. He always believed that if we looked after ourselves, we wouldn't need to worry about money. We wouldn't need to go to the hospital. This was by far one of the most. It was the most ridiculous opinion I've ever heard. My parents immediately phoned my sister, but she told them that she wouldn't come back or help them. Apparently it was tacky of our parents to ask her rich husband for money. This was so soon after their marriage. She didn't want her. She didn't want her husband to think she was just after his money. She also didn't want to travel back. She couldn't leave her home or her 2 children. They weren't even hers. They were her husband's children. They were from a previous marriage. But she was too preoccupied with. She was trying to act like a happy family. She was too busy with her husband's family to see her own parents in hospital following a tragic road accident. She couldn't have helped, even if she had wanted to. Without her husband's help, she would not have been able to do so without his help. She couldn't have bought the flight tickets back home on her own. Now she's a stay-at-home mom. She looks after children that aren't her own. She is no longer the favorite daughter. She was the golden child. I was shocked that they didn't even call me first. It made me even more angry. It was really annoying when my uncle told me that my parents now expected me to pay for their medical care. It's a lot of money, and if I agreed, I'd have a difficult time getting back on my feet financially. I don't want to spend so much money, especially on people who have never cared about me or shown me any kindness, love throughout my life. I know they have other family members who can look after them. Even if I don't pay, someone else will. But my parents seem more worried. They don't want to seem like they're begging for money. They told me not to borrow money from. They said that asking other people for money would be more embarrassing than asking them, borrowing from me. This is because they would have to give it back more quickly than I would. That is what they said this when they asked me to pay their debts. They even promised that I would get my money back. They said they would get their money back quickly. I don't know what to do. I'm in a bad situation. I can either make my parents look bad or lose them by not paying for their medical care, bills, and focus on myself. Or I may pay for them. I'll lose my money and then wait forever for them to pay me back. To be honest, I don't want to help them. We haven't spoken in 2 years. I've had a difficult relationship with my family for a long time. It's been like that for as long as I can remember. They're like strangers to me now, so I don't want to help them. But if I don't help, am I no better than Allison? That would be hard to accept. Is it wrong of me? I don't want to help my parents, but I don't want to pay their hospital costs, especially after such a tragic accident. Update number 1. Hello, I've decided not to help my parents. It was a difficult decision, but I was sure that I'm sure someone else will be able to take care of their bills. They don't need to worry. They just got in touch because they didn't want to ask their other relatives. They were just too selfish. I haven't told them about my decision yet. How do you tell your family? I'm not sure how to tell them I'm not going to help my parents. And then there's the question of paying for their medical bills. It was a tragic accident. It's been almost 5 days since I met them. After reading the comments, I realized I was still competing with Allison, but I didn't realize it because she didn't help our parents. I felt like I had to do better than her. I felt like I had to prove that I was the better daughter. But I guess I'll never be able to get that. I need to stop being so competitive. No matter how hard I try, I can't change it. It's just who I am. Now, most of the comments criticized my parents for not having health insurance. I agree. It was quite silly of my father to discourage it. If I had been around, things might have been different. I would have made sure they had insurance. He didn't even have his car insured. He thought he was a very good driver. They're happy that the accident was caused by the truck driver, since otherwise, if it had been their fault, they would have had to pay for the car repairs themselves. As for my parents' financial situation, which a lot of you have asked about, I would say they are doing well financially. They are not rich or poor. My father is the head of sales at his company. My mother is a stay-at-home mom, works in human resources at a smaller firm. They earn enough money to live well. They live well, especially. This is because they don't have to support me anymore. Or Allison. Allison and I didn't have to worry about money growing up. But we didn't have much money, so we couldn't live extravagantly. We were middle class, and my parents still are. I don't see why they can't pay their own medical bills. If they can, they could borrow money and promise to pay it back later. They will definitely be able to pay their debts. They haven't made things clear for me. Explanation for why they can't. I doubt I will ever find out. Update number 2. I told my parents that I would not pay their bills. They had been in touch for the previous week. And the day before that too. I knew I couldn't just ignore them and wait. They were going to be released from hospital soon. So I answered their calls and told them I thought about it, but I didn't feel I had to. They were not happy about it. My mother was very angry with me. She was shrieking as loudly as she could, even though she had broken ribs. She called me ungrateful and used the usual rude words. My father, on the other hand, he just told me that I was no longer his daughter. He then ended the call. It didn't hurt as much as I expected. To be honest, it had been a long time since I felt like their daughter. I can't remember a time when my parents showed me love. They hadn't spoken to me on purpose for 2 years. I moved out after they had snubbed me on a very important birthday. I had never really had parents. I'm just going to keep living my life, as I have for the last 2 years, and maybe even before that. This decision doesn't really affect me. This is despite what my parents expect. Unfortunately, after I spoke to my parents, then my uncle rang to have another go at me. I ended the call after a few minutes. I didn't want to listen to him either, so I ended the call. They can think what they like about me. It doesn't matter anymore. Later, my uncle sent me a text to let me know that my parents might still ask other family members for money. He also said that my parents had decided to use the money from the wedding. They had set aside money for me and Allison. They had already spent more than half of it on Allison's wedding. And what was left? They spent most of it on a trip to Europe. That's why they had almost no savings left. This meant they couldn't pay their medical bills. So the riddle is solved. Of course, my uncle told me all of this to upset me, but I felt relieved that I hadn't wasted my hard work. I hadn't wasted the money I'd earned on their expenses. They had carelessly wasted their own money. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my responsibility. I was glad I hadn't wasted my money on their expenses. They had wasted their own money, and it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my responsibility that they didn't have insurance. They had the wrong idea. They could ask their family for money or starve. But I was not going to give them anything. They weren't entitled to anything from me. I was not going to give them my time or money. Update number 3. Hey, something pretty strange happened today. I need to talk about it. I haven't been able to tell my friends what has been happening, because most of them don't know what's going on. Most of my friends have only known me for a short time. I don't think I want to share anything. I don't want to talk about my history with these people. So Reddit is the only place I can talk about it. Spin. I haven't spoken to my parents in about 2 weeks. Allison came to my apartment a few hours ago. She arrived in the evening. I was very surprised. First and foremost, I didn't expect her to know where I lived. Apparently, one of our high school friends told her about the neighborhood where I lived. She asked around to find out exactly where I was. That's a lot of effort for her to go to just to meet me. I mean, of all people. She looked and acted very differently than I remembered. She's much more sophisticated and polished now. This is very different from how she used to be. She used to speak in high school. She sounds more ladylike and behaves better now. She has also changed her style of clothing. She also has a new sense of style, and her jewelry has changed too. She now wears more sophisticated makeup. It felt as if I wasn't even speaking to Allison. But she hasn't changed as a person. You can't change who someone is. You can't put cosmetics on your heart and tell people to name it Mrs. Davis as she did to herself. She hasn't changed as a person. Her personality and ideas are still the same. She knocked on my door and I let her in. I was surprised to see her, but I was also interested to know why she had stopped by. I decided to listen to what she had to say. We talked a bit about her life. She told me things about her life that she didn't have to tell me. Everything. She told me about her recent activities and achievements. She said she was a stay-at-home mom to 2 toddlers. She is married to a rich man. I just nodded and listened. She talked about how she said she had nothing to worry about but her nails. She even urged me to do the same. She told me that being a housewife is not appreciated enough. Traditional housewife was. I couldn't wait for her to stop talking about it. She kept talking about other things, but I wanted her to get to the point. Finally, after about 15 minutes of talking about her life, she finally explained why she was there. She said she had come back to see our parents. They had begged her to visit. After the accident, they didn't want her money. They just wanted her to be there for them. After 2 weeks, she decided to return. And while she was here, she thought she would come and see me so we could finally make peace. So far so good. But then she started complaining. She said that our parents wanted to see us too much. She also said that they were disrespectful to her new family. She carried on and on. She said she had to leave. She said she had to go to visit her 2 babies and their nanny. She said she hated our parents for making her do it. Choose between them and her children. I can never understand. She keeps referring to them as her children, but I don't understand why. When they are not hers. They are actually her husband's children. They are from his previous marriage. I hadn't asked her about this. She then told me a lot about her marriage and spouse. According to what I gathered, Allison's husband most likely married her just to improve his chances of. He probably married her to get the kids to live with him more often. And he did just that. But she thought he loved her. He had been in a long and difficult legal battle to get custody of his children. He was also a businessman. He didn't have enough time for his children. His ex-wife was using this against him. Then he said he was engaged. He said he was going to marry her. As soon as the divorce was finalized, this made things better for him. Allison told me all of this while she was boasting about how she had protected those kids. To me, it sounded like her husband had cheated on her. They hadn't known each other for more than a year when he asked her to marry him, so it was obvious he wasn't in love with her. It's rare to fall in love so easily, especially after a divorce. But Allison didn't seem to realize. Or maybe she knew he didn't love her, but she was ready to overlook that because of his money balance. She seemed happy She was happy being a nanny for her husband's children. On top of that, she was upset with our parents for wanting her to be there for their children after they had been in it. It was a terrible thing to happen. She thought that being there for them was important. She thought that this was taking time away from her new family. Her new family included a husband who probably didn't love her, and 2 children who were not biologically connected to her. But these children seemed to be doing well with their nanny just as they were with her. If ungrateful had a face, it would be Allison's. Allison would be the one to do this. I don't like my parents, but when she said how much they needed her, I understood. I was shocked. This was the lady they had repeatedly chosen over me. She eventually got to the point of her visit. She told me that she was leaving in 2 days. She had promised Mom and Dad. She said she would stay for at least a month. But now she said she was tired of hearing them talk about the terrible event and how it was the worst experience. It was the worst experience of their lives. She said this for the 10th time. She said she needed to go home soon. What is her solution? She asked me. To make peace with our parents and take her place? She didn't want to feel terrible about it. She didn't want to leave them when they needed her. She didn't know they had cut me off again. She didn't know that I refused to help pay their bills. Most likely, because they don't talk about or think about me. So they didn't tell Allison. Allison came here to get my sympathy. She wanted me. She wanted me to feel sorry for her. Having to deal with our parents and leaving her family. She wanted to use her. She wanted me to feel sorry for her and use that to persuade me to take her place and provide. She wanted me to provide emotional support for our parents because she didn't want to do it herself. It was typical Allison manipulation. But I'd seen these tactics from her many times before. To fall for them, I had no intention of telling her how I truly felt while she was in my home, because it would definitely lead to a fight. So I promised her I'd try. But I know I won't. She left after telling me to stay in touch. But I knew she didn't mean it. To be honest, I was glad when she left. She's horrible and selfish. She's also really boring. I could barely say anything while she went on about her boring life. In California, her life is all about parties. She also talks a lot about her stepchildren and husband. She thinks she is living a dream, but I found it depressing. It's clear that her husband doesn't love her and her children already. She spends half of her time with her mother and stepchildren. Of course, they'll probably prefer their birth mother when they grow up. They will prefer their birth mother to Allison. I think they probably already do based on what I've heard. But that's fine because she chose that life for herself. The life I chose for myself will be far away from my family. I won't miss my family at all. I don't feel sorry for them. Today taught me I was right to distance myself from my parents and sister. I don't want to be part of their lives. They're selfish and cruel. I don't think they have the capacity to think about anything. They only think about themselves. Allison especially is very selfish. I'm embarrassed to know these people. At least now I've been. I'm glad I've managed to cut all ties with them now. I don't think they'll be able to contact me now. I blocked Allison as soon as she left. I've also stopped my parents and others from getting in touch. I've also stopped my parents and other relatives from contacting me for a few days. I am sure that I am safe from being disturbed by my relatives. I'll do the same again soon. I hope they don't try to contact me again after this. I'm much better off without them. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to get updates. Shocking real-life stories that are happening around you.